welcome to the third of our Scottish Opera special podcasts. And today I'm talking to David Kettle, the programme editor for Scottish Opera. Hello, David.
Hi, Alistair, how are you?
I'm well, and I'm very interested in this because I do think that the programmes for Scottish Opera are really excellent.
Thank you very much. We'll try our best.
It's one of the few that I keep a hold of, they don't just go in the back of the car as I drive away. So explain a little bit about your role as programme editor.
Well, I've only been doing the role for a year for a start, so I'm still fairly fresh to it myself, so it's basically one season that I've done so far. So what I do is the main stage opera programmes, which are the kind of the big ones and the more elaborate ones with several articles in them, going into things in quite a lot of depth. But then also do the programmes for the operas in concert, do programmes for a few education projects, concerts given by the orchestra, other sort of smaller things like that. And I've also been looking after the magazine called Brio, which might not be that familiar to a wider audience, but it's kind of primarily for sort of funders and sponsors and supporters, that kind of thing. So it's quite a sort of broad role, but very interesting, very, very interesting.
What strikes me about the programmes is it's not just purely here's Act 1, here's Act 2, here's your interval, and that's it. There's lots of extra information on, in particular I'm thinking about the Magic Flute recently. How do you strike that balance? Because I take it you can't just go, I'm going to do a 300-page programme, and there's all sorts of considerations there.
Well, it's interesting you say that, because it's kind of one of the... I will come back to your question, but I'm kind of aware of other opera companies around the world, and you look at some of the programmes that they put out, and they really are almost 300-page, massive, great things with the whole libretto and sort of academic articles and music analyses and very, very elaborate things.
Right.
I don't think we'd have the money to do anything like that, but I don't think it would necessarily be appropriate or that wanted. I was thinking about this beforehand, and without getting too sort of pretentious about it, it kind of struck me. It's interesting you saying about not throwing them into the back of the car and all that, because it's I suppose that's something that I hadn't consciously thought of before, that you kind of thinking of these programs as stuff, that information that the audience needs to know and they need to have available to them on the night, like who's singing what, who these people are, who did it, who directed it, all of that stuff that they're going to find useful on the night in terms of what this is, what it's about, what happens, who these characters are, that kind of thing. But then probably quite a bit of information that they're going to hopefully go away and find useful afterwards, and read about afterwards, or think about, or if it's something, if they've wanted to, to devote that amount of time and money to seeing a production like this, that actually it will have some kind of impact on them, and they'll want to sort of think about it more, think about different angles, look at different aspects of the context, or that kind of thing, and that's where some of the other articles come in. So I guess that's the kind of general sort of thinking behind them. And
so there's a fair level of research involved, I guess.
There is, yeah. It kind of varies. The Magic Flute was an interesting example. Actually, a relatively straightforward example. Because the production already exists, and it's a revival, so we know what it's like. We know what the production is like, what the thinking is behind the production, that kind of thing. So that sort of answers a lot of questions immediately. When it's a new production, it's interesting actually, because we've just this morning had a sort of presentation from the director of Nixon in China coming up at the start of 2020. And from that, actually, that's another slightly complicated example, because that's another production that actually already exists, because it's already been put on. But if it's a production that doesn't exist, for example, Cabanová that we had earlier in the season, it is a case of talking in quite a lot of depth with the director about what their thinking is, what kind of material might support it in an appropriate way, what kind of things we should be talking about, what kind of aspects of not only the opera and the composer and the context and all of that of its time, but also of their thinking about the production, what they're trying to sort of convey, what aspects they're trying to focus on or look at, or if they're trying to surprise the audience by approaching it in a particularly unusual way or something like that. So there's quite a lot of sort of discussion about that, and I mean I can kind of go away and come up with ideas for, you know, articles based on a particular opera that, you know, I might find interesting, that might not have anything at all to do with the way that director is thinking about it, and they may be focusing on something quite different. So it's a sort of conversation that happens between us, I guess. And
do you have to write the synopsis of each act? Is it good? No, synopsis is probably the wrong word, but no, kind of breakdown of it.
Generally, sometimes the directors would actually prefer to do that themselves, because again they've got a particular slant on it, or actually sometimes it has. I can't think of examples, but it has happened where there are aspects of the plot that they may be interpreting in a slightly different way, or not focusing on that. So if we say that this happens, actually on stage it's not quite going to happen like that. I can't think of an example. But generally it's me that will put them together. I mean, that's not that challenging a thing to do, because these synopses already exist, and the works are quite well known, and you can load up recordings and scores. And obviously we sort of know them already.
I was thinking about the kind of contemporary ones, perhaps, or the first time that they've been put on, where you want to give people an idea of where they are at a certain time, but you don't want to spoil what's coming.
But it was interesting, we had that conversation about Anthropocene. Some people in the creative team thinking that we should really tell the whole plot in the programme in a lot of detail, because obviously it's a new opera, people wouldn't know anything about it, wouldn't know what to expect. All of that. And then other people saying, well, but hang on, it's all very clear when you're in the theatre, when you're seeing it. And plus the fact that it's essentially a thriller, so you don't want to start giving everything away.
That's exactly the one I was thinking of. Because when you have at the end, there was when the night I was there anyway, there was a real intake of breath, and people going, oh my goodness. And I think that, because you do flick through the programme beforehand, and you know what's coming up next or whatever, and that would have wouldn't have been the case, I think, if it had been detailed with what would happen.
We kind of went for a sort of middle way in the end, and sort of thought, we can't just. I think at one stage we were even contemplating saying, there's an expedition in the Arctic, they make a unaccountable strange discovery in the ice. ...
I'd
leave it at that, which could be plausible, but would hardly count as a synopsis, really. I'm not sure you could really call that a synopsis. It's a sort of introduction.
Do you find that there's expectations of people about what they expect from a programme?
I think there is, but at the same time I think it's kind of fairly well established across opera and also sort of classical music and all of that. I think it's it's interesting, because I've just been, since sort of finishing off the Magic Flute programme and sort of finishing off that season, I've been having a look at what other opera companies are doing. And it is quite surprising how similar programmes are. Certainly in Britain, it's quite surprising how similarly we all approach things. And you sort of think, there's probably a reason for that, which is that that's what people expect to have, and that's what's useful to them. I think that there are. I think there's an argument for almost surprising people sometimes with some of the content, and almost giving them something that they're not quite sure why it's there. But that hopefully will make some sense when they've seen the opera, or when they've thought about it, or when they've realised what that production is doing, or the kind of the themes, or the angles on the opera that it's taking. I'm not thinking of the article about Sacrifice by Richard Holloway that we had in the Anthropocene programme, that was sort of a bit, I know it raised a few eyebrows, and it was a bit of a bleak slant on one of the themes of the opera, but we sort of thought this is quite. I mean, it is a key theme of the opera, and he was a very good person to write about it from his particular perspective, and I think it was an interesting way of being slightly provocative in a sort of hopefully a sort of stimulating way that the opera goers would read this and think, oh, this is an interesting theme in the context of the opera. I wonder what I think about it, and I wonder how it ties in with what I'm being presented with on stage and how I'm viewing that, how I'm seeing that, that kind of thing.
I mean, it's those unexpected pieces which I find so interesting that you think, I can't think off the top of my head, but something which just adds a little bit more to what you have seen. And you do take away, and most of the productions are, don't just leave you when you walk out. They really stay with you. And you kind of do want to, I have seen myself get home and open up and just say, right, I want to know more about why this has been put on, apart from anything else, and the context of it.
It's interesting because that brings up another question, which is about the directors actually writing or sort of almost speaking to the audience directly in the programmes. And sometimes they're very keen to, sometimes they're very keen not to. They just want the work to sort of speak for itself. And obviously you can see both arguments completely, that sometimes people want to lay out their vision and lay out their plans and say, this is the way I'm approaching it, this is why, this is what I think is important, and all that. And other people are really just wanting to say, well, just engage with what I'm making, not with what I'm saying about what I'm making. So that's another thing. We sort of have a bit of both with that, and some and some directors are quite keen to be quite open about it. It's interesting. Tom Allen has written an introduction to the original staging of the Magic Flute back in 2012 or 2013, and wrote a new introduction for this one, in which he really goes into quite a lot of detail about the very specific things that inspired him, about Glasgow, and about all kinds of different aspects of the city, and about his own childhood and all of that. And then other directors will just be much more sort of vague about just sort of ideas and that kind of thing. It's very interesting, and I think that's fine. I think that's really good. That's it's a different way of approaching their creative minds and all of that.
And the more traditional ones, the ones that have been adapted in all so many different ways, how do you find coming up with something new to see?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I'm in a sort of slightly better position with that, having only been in the role for a year. So I know quite a lot of these things are revivals and have been done before. For example, Tosca has been done several times before, but they're kind of new to me in this context and in this role, so I can approach them sort of slightly fresh. But I know one of the things that my predecessor was saying was, I'm kind of starting to run out of ideas. I've been through this sort of twice already, sort of thing. So he had been involved for quite a long time. So
So how did you come to this role?
How did I come to this role? Well, I suppose through writing some of the programme notes myself. I mean, I've written several in the past, and I've done quite a lot of, I suppose, my sort of personal sort of and all that would be for more sort of 20th century and contemporary work, and I've written several programme notes for those operas that have been on for the Trial and for The Devil Inside, and I can't remember, so quite a few others. And I guess it was through that I sort of got to know the company slightly from the inside, got aware of what was going on. And when I did hear that my predecessor, Ian, who had been in the role for a very long time and done absolutely amazing work, was moving on to new things, it was I thought this would be an interesting role to move into, see what
so it was a kind of love of contemporary and modern opera, and being a writer anyway, that you were asked to kind of get involved there, or
not specifically. I mean, I was aware. I mean, Ian told me I was aware that he was moving on to do other things, so it was kind of just thinking, I wonder if this is something that they might be looking for somebody. Let's let's explore this. I mean, in kind of my broader life and all that, I'm generally this is only a freelance. Only a freelance. This is a freelance position. It's not. I mean, it's not a full-time position by any means, and I'm very much sort of in and out of the company, in and out of the office as required. So I'm sort of balancing this with other things that I'm doing as well. So it's that's a sort of bit of a change for me as well, taking on a role that is actually, although it's not full time, it's still pretty big.
Well developed.
It's quite a lot to do, which is great.
Because as we've established, talking to other people, is the opera season. It's 12 months. It's kind of
Well, I sort of had a break. I mean, my busy time sort of ended in, I don't know, sort of mid-April, end of April, to getting the Magic Flute programme done and to print. But of course, that run there's got a very long run going to quite a lot of different venues. And the temptation is obviously for me now to sort of think, that's my summer, that's my break.
Yeah.
But actually, no, there's things coming up in August, September, and October which need to be done now. So it's always, I suppose that's the other thing about the role. It's always working quite far ahead of the actual performances coming out. It's always, like I've said we're thinking about Next in China now, essentially. So it's always sort of looking quite far ahead.
On a practical level, then, you've got to get the biographies of the people who are involved and all of that in. How close to publishing is that done? Because obviously things can change.
Those things don't tend to change too much. I'm trying to think of something that may change. I mean, it goes. We're tending to work on them. I guess we start working on them maybe a couple of months before the production opens, and then we're finally putting the final touches to them maybe 2 to 3 weeks before the production opens, just to give it time to go to the printers and physically be printed and then delivered and distributed and all that kind of thing. The biographies, they do change. They do change a little bit. I mean, it's mainly a case of dealing with the singers and the other artists' agents who should have up-to-date versions and should have the most up-to-date information, and they always get to see what's going into the program about them anyway, so we can always make changes and add any last-minute additions. And
I guess by that point, the singers and who's involved is pretty set.
This is this is the thing. I mean, that kind of information is done. The sort of the bare bones of who's singing what and all that is set fairly far in advance, and that doesn't tend to change too much. I mean, for example, the Magic Flute, that was not only has a huge cast, but because it was going to quite a few venues over quite a long period of time, actually had 2 possible people singing different roles in different venues at different times, so actually made the biographies there really, really quite extensive. So it's a matter of bringing all that together as well.
And are you involved with the design of it at all?
To a certain extent, yeah. We do have 2 designers. We have a design manager and a designer who both work on it as well. I mean, their roles are there's the question of simply laying it out as a layout and styling it up using the right fonts, using the right colours, all that business, which I don't do. I just work with the text, just sort of work with the raw text.
Just as an aside, having worked in other areas, I know that companies have set fonts that they use.
Exactly.
Is it something like
that? It's all that kind of thing. Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense, because you wouldn't want to. I mean, whereas something like the cover, you might expect it to look a bit different for each production depending on what it is. You wouldn't want to open up the insides and just find a completely different looking thing if you were coming to more than one opera. It makes a lot of sense for it to be in Scottish Opera's sort of identity, its sort of general sort of design identity. Then actually thinking about the working with the directors on the articles, another sort of area where we liaise quite closely is about the kind of imagery and that sort of thing, which is a whole whole other area, which can be, and that's something that I will work with the designers on, but also liaise with the director about, and the designer of the production for that matter. And again, there we might be looking at things that are quite literally showing some aspect of the production, like I think we had an old picture of Papageno or something, sort of from an original production in the 18th century or whatever. But then we might also be looking for quite oblique things, maybe sort of images that have inspired the designer, or things that people might look at and then when they see in the production realise the connection, realise what it's, why we've used that in the programme, that we don't necessarily particularly explain in the programme. We don't necessarily, point to and say, we're showing you this picture because the designer thought that this was very influential in their views or whatever, but hopefully...
So it could be a colour scheme, or it could be something that's actually in the production.
Well, we used to, one example I can think of was we used to really quite a striking still from Stalker, the film by Tarkovsky, in the Catcher Cabanova programme, simply because that was a film that the director and the designer both said we're quite sort of heavily inspired by this in the production, the look of it, the whole sort of feel of it. But again, it's a picture of a man sort of almost lying face down in a puddle with a dog next to him, and it's quite dark. It's quite sort of what's going on here. But you see the production and you think, oh yeah, that's the same sort of mood. It's that sort of claustrophobic, decaying sort of end of things kind of feeling to it.
And I guess that's another aspect of how much you want to explain in a programme, and how you want to leave for other people to work out for themselves.
Yeah. And I think there's a line to be drawn in not signposting too much, not sort of patronising the readers or the audience members in terms of really sort of pointing out things and making things very, very obvious, but at the same time not being too obscure and too esoteric about crazy ideas or whatever, which I think we tread quite an efficient line on that. I think.
But it is an interesting line, because you have this a traditional aspect to the opera, and as we're seeing, there's now more contemporary work coming in, but even in the design and the discussions and all of those things, there are more contemporary takes on it.
Yeah.
And again, you probably you want people to have something memorable, but then you maybe don't want to alienate.
No, exactly. And I think there's things that you can do to provide in sort of pictorially and in terms of the design, to provide context and to provide images that might again be sort of stimulating or provocative in the context of that production, or might sort of illuminate aspects of that production without necessarily sort of being overt about the links or being overt about why you're doing it. I mean, actually, the Magic Flute is another joy to work on in that sense, because the fact that Tom was very, very clear about being inspired by sort of industrial Glasgow and shipyards and all of this kind of thing just meant pictorially there was just such a richness of images, which we really went for. We just thought, well, let's go for it. Let's use some really lovely pictures and really striking images, and I think it's come out very strongly as a result.
Have you ever gone with a design of something and the director said, "Oh no, that's not what I wanted to"?
Not personally, but then I have only been around for a year.
There is time.
I know it's happened. I know that has happened, and it's. I guess that's something that could easily come about in terms of, you have your own ideas about what an opera is about, or what's important about it, and then the director actually thinks completely differently, and they're exploring a completely different sort of theme, a different idea. Hopefully you've got enough enough ideas about their way of viewing it that you know, it will sort of limit that happening. But yes, I'm sure that'll be happening. At
No,
some
I was just
point.
thinking about my time in publishing and taking various covers to a writer and went, I hate them all.
Well, there's a lot of psychology in that as well, in terms of sort of, you know, you give someone 20 possibilities and none of them will be right. You give them one possibility and.
The Richard Holloway piece you mentioned, was that written specifically for? That's interesting. And is that common that someone would write something specifically for an opera for production?
It's universal. They're all the as far as I know, as far as I think don't think I'm talking out of turn there. That I think everything that we. Yeah,
and I guess what I mean is, I suppose I had it in my head that it might be taken from something he'd written elsewhere. But no,
that wasn't. I think I can understand that you might think that, but no, it wasn't actually. We approached him and said, "Would you be interested? This is the opera. This is the thinking, you know, that kind of thing." He was really quite interested.
So I guess to flip that on its head, you never take an essay, you never find an essay or something which is relevant and think, "Oh, this would be perfect to use."
Again, I've only been involved for a year, so I haven't done that myself yet. I don't think it's been done in the past, not to my knowledge. I sort of feel like there may be occasions when that might be appropriate if it was a very, very, very high-profile author that was never going to do anything especially for us, but would allow us to use an excerpt from something that was absolutely perfect for a particular aspect, or a director said, I really feel like we need to use an excerpt from this book or something like that. I guess we could conceivably look at that. I wouldn't rule it out, but I think it's quite nice to have original content.
Definitely, definitely.
It's better generally, and that's what we would, generally do. I think that's the kind of supposition that we feel like we're giving people stuff that they can't get elsewhere.
So you've got the director who will often write a piece, and it could be of varying length. It could be a page, or it could be more substantial. You have. Do you write pieces yourself? Do you do?
I have done. I did the main introductory article for Anthropocene mainly because I knew Stuart and Louise, Stuart McCray and Louise Welsh, who wrote it, from having done the article on their previous opera. So I sort of felt like I was in a position to talk about it from a sort of position of knowledge. I wouldn't necessarily particularly sort of grab things myself. I think it's better to go to people who I think are going to be probably better informed than me about a particular composer or repertoire or I guess that kind of thing.
That's interesting. Is the third? How do you identify that third group? Did you or Louise or Stuart know that Richard liked opera or understood what the themes were? Or just very interested in the different people that write for a programme. So you've got your director's POV, you've got your own maybe article, and then you maybe have a third party who you approach, I presume, to say, would you write a piece on this?
So it's quite interesting actually, because that, I guess we would have a main article in each programme, which tends to be fairly sort of general. That almost sounds negative, but fairly sort of generally looking at that opera, looking at its context, looking at the composer,
the history,
talking about exactly what this is, what this piece is, and why it was written, and what happened to it, what it's about, and that kind of thing. And for those, I guess it's a matter of approaching people who have a specialism in that particular area of opera. It's Verdian romantic opera or Baroque opera or goodness knows what, contemporary opera or whatever, that they might have something to say about it. They might have some particular insight into that area. It's when you get to the other articles that life becomes more tricky and more interesting. That they could really be about anything. So, like, I'm already today thinking about Nixon in China and thinking about even the themes that the work throws out, let alone the ideas that the director has got about how he's going about staging it, which could bring in any number of different angles, different ways of thinking about the themes and thinking about the history, or America or China or Chinese.
You might get that 300-page.
This is it. I mean, it could go anywhere. And to be honest, it's the same with anything. It's the same with any of these things. You could, look at anything. If you start thinking about anything tangentially, you think, well, what is a theme out of this opera?
Yeah.
Could we expand it? Could we explore it? Would it give insights? Would it shine a different light on things? But that's the fun of it. That's the joy of it. That's great.
And you're not just involved with the main productions. We've got the touring ones and things like that as well.
Yes, yeah. Those are without wanting to sort of do them down. Those are more straightforward, and the programs are less elaborate.
Yeah.
So for the operas in concert, we tend to do a sort of smaller version of the sort of big main stage opera programs, with just one sort of main article in it, which is talking about the work and talking about the history and that kind of thing. Still something substantial and worthwhile and informative and all of that, but we tend not to go for the sort of the subsidiary. Mainly because I know
so much stuff.
They're kind of staged, but staged much less elaborately, obviously. Yeah. So there's, in terms of the staging, there's much less to talk about with those. And then there's things like the Opera Highlights Tour, which again is more about the repertoire that's being performed and giving a little bit of insight into that. The singers who are taking part, those kind of things. It's sort of it sounds negative, but it's more functional. It's more sort of but actually with those, that's not entirely fair. We do still have the director's instructions into how they're going about bringing this together, what they're trying to say, what they're looking at, what they're trying to explore.
And it's a lot of information to get into those little paragraphs to say this song, has been performed only this amount of time, and it was here.
Yeah, exactly. So we're wanting to sort of provide that kind of information for people, and I guess it's all the way through. It's sort of what we were talking about before. It's finding a balance between wanting to provide the information, wanting to make it as open and as accessible as possible to people who might be new to it, but at the same time talking to people on a sort of a high enough level that they're not going to feel patronised. They're not going to feel like we're just talking down to them or spoon feeding them stuff that they already know. Yeah, that sort of thing.
And again, you may not be able to answer this, but have you got a programme that from the coming season that you're particularly excited about working on?
Well, from today, Nixon in China, definitely, only because that's now fresh in my mind, and there's kind of all sorts of ideas about what we might be able to do with that one, in terms of not just the themes that the opera deals with, but the way that the director is approaching it and the way that it's being staged as well. There's sort of quite a lot that could be talked about in those terms, which could be quite interesting. I mean, they're all really interesting, and I know I haven't really discussed it with him yet, but I know the director of the Gondoliers and Utopia Limited as well, Stuart Maunder, has lots of ideas for why those works are significant, what they say, all kinds of different ways of looking at them. So that's going to be a really interesting one to kind of kick off and have lots of ideas going around. But I mean, all of them are going to be really interesting. They're all interesting in their different ways, to be honest. Yeah. They are quite different projects. Again, I guess like the experience of going to the opera itself, you will go and it's essentially the same thing you're experiencing. It's an orchestra and people singing on stage and the staging and all that. But actually the experience you have is very, very different depending on the subject matter, the idiom, when it was written, how it's being staged, all of that kind of thing. And it's the same with working on the programmes, really.
Well, as someone who writes reviews, I find them invaluable.
Fantastic. Good. That's what we're aiming for.
So, David, thank you very much for talking to us today.
You're very welcome. Thank you.
And we'll be back soon with someone else from Scottish Opera. Cheers.